Hey guys, Nicole here at Holistic Vitality. Today I want to discuss the topic of divination. And according to the Encyclopedia Britannica version definition of divination, it says it's the practice of determining the hidden significance or cause of events, sometimes foretelling the future by various natural, psychological, and other techniques found in all civilizations, both ancient and modern. Oftentimes in divination, there's different tools one might use in order to, say, connect in a supernatural means to receive insight or wisdom or knowledge, or I think the misnomer is fortune telling. I think that discredits some of the intuitive faculties that can be pretty profound in result of divination. So there's many forms of, or many tools, if you will, that one may choose to explore when it comes to divination. So I'll kind of mention some of the listed ones and maybe give you some insight from my personal experience with using some of these, and also going over a new form of divination that is pretty cool as well. So astrology can be considered a form of divination and so-called foretelling. In fact, that was the earliest form of divination that I was introduced to when I was 12 years old, and have been studying astrology since I was 12. And I really love the depth that can come through really understanding and interpreting how the cosmos work, and the planets' effects and the luminary effects on us individually, as well as how it affects us specifically when you are able to analyze it from the perspective of one's birth chart, which in that case, your birth chart is derived and basically from the moment of your birth. So it's kind of like a blueprint that the astrologer would look at to see what that very moment in time, what the constellations were doing with the planets in them and their interaction, and how that expresses itself through your own unique personality. And then there's lots that they can therefore interpret in a predictive sense, if you will, based on the themes that they're seeing of how the planets are currently interacting, not only in our solar system, but how that may therefore express and interact through your unique birth chart and influence you personally. So that was something I was introduced to at a very young age, and just loved it and dove right in. And so I do myself do astrology readings because I find it to be a very useful tool in understanding somebody before, without even having to necessarily have known them their whole lives. And so it's not through like interaction that you get to understand them. It's more through getting a understanding of their birth chart, and also understanding what's going on currently in the cosmos. Obviously, I'm sure most people are even familiar with tarot cards as another form of divination, which I definitely started dabbling with in my teenage years. And it does provide some interesting insights, as it kind of picks up on your energies, especially if you've really worked with the cards and worked with the understanding. You're kind of developing a relationship with those cards, in which when you then do certain laying of spreads, it might provide certain insight for you. Another form of divination that I was introduced to myself when I was 13 that I really feel like profoundly affected the way I perceived my reality and the spirit realm is I was introduced to something that, or a modality that was introduced to me under the name the glass. Now the glass is a way of connecting directly to spirit realm and or, being in contact with, say, your deceased loved ones, for example, or it could even be a tool used to connect to your guides. That being said, the most similar divination system that relates to the glass would therefore be considered the Ouija board. But the problem is with the Ouija board is I feel like there's a lot of negative connotated energy within that because it's treated most oftentimes like a game or a tool for experimentation, and therefore isn't always done in a way that is honorable, and it is a portal to the spirit realm. And so if you are someone who doesn't know what they're doing and is just dabbling, and you therefore may not necessarily be protected or know how to really work with this tool to where you could therefore invite in different spirit beings that may not be of the light. Okay. And therefore there's also a lot of piggybacking on, through like movies and like horror films and things like that, and so it's kind of been given a bad connotation for that reason and something to fear. But I would say it is the person in question who's participating in this, their intentions and how they may or may not hold sacred space when beginning to divine with this tool, where and what you therefore may be inviting in. Myself, when I was introduced to it at that young age, we would use it to, say, communicate with my great-grandmother at the time. In which case, how you would ascertain who you're connecting to is better if you are being purposeful on who you're trying to communicate to, and therefore, typically speaking, you would know about this individual if it's a spirit you're trying to contact that was once your loved one in physical form, and so therefore you know enough information perhaps about this individual that you can ask trick questions to see how they answer to make sure that is who you are communicating with. The downside, I would say, to working with this system in my experience is that you can somewhat influence it with your mental activity, especially if you're trying to force the answer that's coming through as it is spelling it out, because your thoughts may dominate the message that may be coming through. On the other side of things, the message that's authentically trying to come through, you might have a perception of it that shows up in your mind, kind of like a pre-knowing what it's going to say. So navigating working with this divination system can be very tricky. Things like tea leaves or tea leaf readings. I've not personally worked with that before. However, I guess my grandmother's sister used to work with this and did a lot of tea leaf readings, and then my mother recently actually just told me that she stopped at doing it for a very long time when in this tea leaf reading she saw the death of her own child, in which case ended up coming true, and so I guess she stopped doing like tea leaf readings for like a decade before she ended up starting it up again. Things like the I Ching, which is a system of throwing coins, and the layouts of how it falls might therefore show up different divine messages based on the layout spread of these. And so I know my mother was pretty into working with I Ching. I remember her throwing coins all the time and doing that in my younger days, or my youth. I myself haven't necessarily explored I Ching myself for personal use, but maybe I will in the future. Oracle cards, you know, picking of a card that has meaning behind it, which has a similar notion behind it as tarot. It just might have its own unique imprint of what that card represents and what information is meant to be relayed through this oracle. Crystal ball gazing. Now, I remember my first time trying to divine using a crystal ball, and I was expecting to see, I guess, visuals in the ball, and I remember I was just zoning in on it, trying to get it, and I was doing it for a while and didn't get anything. But what was crazy, and this was when I was also in my teenage years, later teenage years, I was doing this, and I remember falling asleep, and I had this crazy dream, which was while my sister was out of state. My sister's 4.5 years younger than me, so I think she was like 15 at the time. And while I was dreaming, I dreamt that I was this bear that was, you know, roaming through the woods, and I show up upon this cabin, and in this cabin I see her having like a sexual encounter, which felt very intrusive of me stumbling upon that, even in this dream form, that it kind of like freaked me out a little bit, because, you know, at the time she, you know, 15, being a virgin, right? I just felt completely like, whoa, what is this? And I remember telling my mom that next morning, I was just like, I just had this really weird dream. I was like, I think you need to talk to Romany and, I don't know, have the sex talk or something, because I was like, that's kind of uncomfortable for me to have. And I was like, I don't know, I just told her to kind of talk to her about it. Well, anyways, that next week my sister returns, and I guess my mom cornered her and was just like, you know, have you been having sex, basically, like, or you have something to tell me? And my sister's jaw just like dropped open, like how the hell does she know? Who told you, you know, like, which one of her friends, you know, let the cat out of the bag? So come to find out, as we explored this conversation, and I asked my sister, you know, of course, her and my mom were like crying, and that's how I walked in on this particular conversation taking place. And my mom let her know that, you know, your sister had this dream, and my sister's like, well, how the hell did you like know this, right? But on top of that, when I asked her, you know, when this happened, and she was just like, Monday night. And then I asked my mom, when did I tell you about the dream? She's like, Tuesday morning. So it was quite profound that I had this prophetic dream the same night that my sister ended up losing her virginity, as uncomfortable as that dream was. But that was my experience with trying to work with divining or divination through a crystal ball. Another thing is you could work with scrying mirrors. I also have a scrying bowl which you could fill up with water, and in fact you can use it as a tool to energize the water with like full moon energy, and even gaze into the reflection of it and see what visions, you know, might come in your internal eye, and it might even provoke such prophetic dreams, or have you become more in tune to your dream state. Runes are another form of divination, which are Nordic stones that have symbols on them that have specific meanings behind it, and you pull the stones and in relevance to your question. You could do a pendulum, which is kind of like a weighted instrument on a string or chain, if you will. And you can oftentimes ask it to show you the vibration of yes, or then ask you to show you the vibration of no. And it does this by either like spinning and stopping or swaying a certain way back and forth, or and by virtue of knowing what yes and no means, you can then ask it questions and see what it responds with, whether it spins or whether it sways back and forth. And so that's another form of divination. I'm sure the list keeps going on, and I'm sure I'll think of more, but there's one in particular that is a newer system that I've been introduced to in this last year by a guy named Jim Gerard, who's perfected this divination system that he calls the Dice Code Oracle divination system. And he's been kind of doing some readings for me over this last year. And how that works is he makes you, look into getting some alphabet dice, in which case this is the one we used, alphabet dice game. There's 36 dice in here with different alphabet letters on them. However, he has me pick out 26 when I roll the dice, or I would say roll the dice. You kind of either form a question with intention, but we've also been playing a lot with just keeping our intentions open. In which case, you would want to kind of like drop the dice, like from just like a few inches off the ground, and based on how they fall, you record them down, and you do them in a row, and you want to do that 5 times for one reading. So you would do 5 rows of the way these dice fall with the letters, and then I'll send him that paper, and I'll date it, and who it's for, which if it's for me, I'll do it for me. And he describes it as gazing into the letters and coming out with words that form oracles as the sentences get put together. So I'll give you an example. I think it's really a cool technique that really has given me another angle of insight that has served me, besides the journey work that I do through clients and the channeling, that messages directly come through that way, or perspective or insight just comes in through that way. Or how also when I've worked with plant medicine, such as ayahuasca, there's lots to process and reflect upon based on whatever comes through in that type of experience, which is also another powerful experience, which I'll do another video about later, especially my recent experience with that. But I'll give you one of his recent divinations that he has interpreted and decoded, if you will, for me, based on the sequence of the letters that fell in this particular reading. So this was probably less than a week ago that I did this one. So it says, your guides, the adept masters of oracle shamanic revelation, are urging you to radiate your internal glow to the masses in order for them to experience the feelings of empowerment and personal enlightenment. She takes out her roadmaps of destiny and throws her arrows of internal wisdom into the spectrum as the masses question the clocks of time and the outcomes of the fate of the world. Your greatest guides are witty and hate to lose their students to the ignorance of unintelligent, impulsive actions. Your internal glow of shamanic wisdom is like the aurora borealis of Antarctica. Small favors go the greatest distance. Rub the lamps of the oracle genies and experience the fulfillment of internal and external radiance to both yourself and the masses. So what I feel like I'm getting from this is, from another angle, my guides urging me to put myself more out there, in which I've starting to do with these videos is to try to kind of share more of my insight or experiences and leave it in your court to interpret or work with and see if you gain perspective from or awareness from, however you may internalize that or see where it might take you down on your path. So and see what I'm called to share at any given moment. So today, like I said, I was called to kind of talk about divination with this particular reading, and the one I just did last night, let me find that one. Okay, so the one that I did a roll of the dice last night, and he sent me an interpretation this morning. Again, his name's Jim Gerard, and I'll put his email in the information below. So if anybody is curious and wants to work with him on this or learn more, I'm sure he would be willing to connect with you. So this interpretation from last night's dice throw says, now this one seems a little less personal to me, as it's kind of like more like open-ended, more in a form of oracle, if you will. And with oracles, there is definitely room for interpretation, okay? So it's not like a prophecy, if you will, of the when this is going to happen and how. And so it is kind of left to your interpretation. Legendary ascended masters came through the misty fog portal holding Thoth's emerald tablets, asking questions regarding righteousness, family matters, ghost phenomena, and broken bridges regarding communications. Flashback memories are revealing the ancients and where they survived the army's blast in the battlefields. Escaping injuries and worldly persecution, they flee the locations of the Windy City and close the gate of that time stream of the forevermost lost tribal exodus of Atlantis. We will find ancient scriptural writings describing the lost tribal exodus, where boats were blocked from leaving the destruction, creating a host of problems. Escaping was almost impossible. So this one seems to be referencing, now I've read Thoth's Emerald Tablets, and he's come through in indirectly, not directly in this one, through a client's channeling who she was able to channel a higher conscious being that spoke through her, in which case mentioned that Thoth would be wanting to work more with me in the future when I've initiated to that stage. We'll see. I guess that would be something to look forward to. But I have explored the Emerald Tablets, and it is written very similarly through the translation anyhow, in that similar kind of poetic oracle form that leaves you kind of subject to interpreting what that means. And in this case, it seems to be alluding to what may have happened in Atlantis regarding the Great Deluge, where the big floods took place and sunk this ancient city. And this mentioning kind of it seems like they were holding on to certain information, but they had to escape the so-called blast in the battlefields with injuries and worldly persecution. So it seems like some were able to escape and some were not able to, until they closed the so-called gate or portal of that time stream. But perhaps this particular portal might be coming through or being opened, and maybe we will be, if not already, finding these so-called ancient scriptural writings describing what it says is the tribal exodus. I don't know. Obviously, this is not one I can perhaps ascertain right now, but this might kind of show up and be shown to us in a different way in external events or timelines. Or maybe it might show up in some of the journeys of clients, or even maybe in an ayahuasca experience, who knows. That's what I find to be so incredible about all these avenues or modalities that kind of give me, anyways, different layers or perspectives or tidbits. And it's like connecting the dots synchronistically as they all kind of show up. And as I reflect back on them, I see a lot of synchronicity, a lot of relatability and unveiling. And sometimes it's not in the moment of that particular, in this case, this reading, where the answers are showing them to me, but it might be unfolded later down the road, which then connects to this. And that's how I find for myself a lot of these forms of divination and other modalities have kind of bridged worlds in my world anyhow, of interpretation and understanding these oracles and connecting the bridge. Another obviously form of divination would be numerology. There's many people out there that subscribe to seeing certain patterns of numbers and having certain interpretations of what that would mean for them when they see them, or finding feathers, right? Some people even ascribe to, when they see a particular bird, they know it's a loved one who may have just passed communicating with them, or if they show up in a dream. Our dreams can be very prophetic a lot of the times too. So I don't know, I think it's fun to explore. Some of them, like I said, need certain precautions, because if you don't know what you're playing with, hence, like the Ouija or anything like that, use your discretion wisely, and be sure to protect yourself in light if you were to explore that, and create like a protective circle, and really set your intentions clearly if that were the case to what you're trying to connect to. Because all of these divination systems do usually work within the realm of your intentions or queries or questions, or the vibration of that which you are projecting, that might therefore connect you to a probable reality of answers or interpretations to work with as you navigate how to respond to those answers, if you will. So anyways, I'm gonna leave it at that, and if you have any questions or anything else that you would like answered, or perhaps you're curious about doing a journey, which I facilitate, the shamanic journeys, I can do those in person and remotely at a distance with equal results as those in person, and they can be very profound as far as you connecting to your experience directly, and therefore being the sole interpreter of what you experience, while being in an out-of-body altered state, astrally, if you will, by connecting to the higher realms, as I facilitate you, like a bridge to connect you, so that you can perhaps get your own guidance and get your own questions answered via higher perspectives of higher conscious beings, or on a multidimensional level through different realms or dimensions. Anything's possible. Let's just put it that way. Anything's possible in that realm of things, and it's quite fascinating and magical and intriguing and thought-provoking. So I love it all. I'm always curious. I'm a truth seeker. I want to know more, and I have lots of questions, but I also vicariously get lots of answers via your questions. That sets the tone as to what might come through. So if you do have questions, I'd love to know what they are. Send them to me. You can comment or private message me or email me, which I'll also put in the link below. Can't wait to connect. All right. Have a good day, you guys. Bye.